us. With a wish for all beings to be free, free of the constriction and contraction of held belief systems and thought patterns, free of the automatic reactivity of held and learned emotional patterns, and free of the isolation and suffering of distorted perceptions. I will always go for refuge to alive, vibrant, radiant, spacious, loving awareness until awareness is ongoing, like the flow of a river. Enthused by wisdom and compassion, today in the presence of all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, of any lineage or none, and or any time or beyond time, generate the mind of full awakening for the benefit of all beings. As long as space remains, as long as beings remain, may I manifest in such a way to ease and dispel the miseries in the universe. So let's see what happens today. We never know, huh? How did we get into this mess? And maybe better yet, how do we get out of it? If you're looking for a path where you don't have any feelings that bother you in any way, no, wrong words. Actually, Buddhism's pretty cool. You can pretty much have anything you want from it. If you want a religion, you can have Buddhism as a religion. If you want to have a whole display of aspects of really open-hearted, open-mindedness with symbols and yidams to represent those, you can have that. It's pretty amazing, actually. If you want a philosophy, you can have that. And if you have a wish like I do in the beginning of the refuge thing I say, wouldn't it be nice if we weren't all trapped by the very thing that builds up unintentionally or unconsciously, the very mess, bilblah, mask, structure, whatever you want to call it, of belief systems, emotional reactive patterns, and distorted perceptions. That very thing gets built up with an effort to protect this being. If you've ever heard I have it right here, but I don't have the translation I really like. Because the original prayer to Kunta Zanpo, although I don't know that it's called that. Maybe I'll find it sometime. We'll look at it a little bit next week. It's very much just like Chenrezig, except it starts at the beginning in our original oops. of believing. And the irony of it is our bodies, our survival instinct, everything about form in aliveness is here because it has an instinct to survive. If it doesn't have an instinct to survive, it doesn't survive. It's that very need to survive as an individual in quotes, that causes us so much suffering. It really doesn't seem fair, does it? I don't think it's fair at all. So somehow, gently over time or quickly in a moment of insight, we have to really notice that there's nothing very individual about us. Oh, we have our individual masks, if you want, or Bill Blahs, of course. But where did those come from? Where'd your personality come from? Where are your hopes and fears coming from? Experiences? If you want to go with the Buddhists, however you interpret it, you can do it with genetics too. None of us created ourselves out of nothing. Right? There wasn't just one day this little inclination to go, oh, I'm going to make myself an individual being. It doesn't happen that way, does it? So whether you want to consider past lives or waves of energy that moves after the form dies, or genetics, or whatever story you might like, there is nothing in our universe that is an independent individual existence. Rest with that for a minute. You might find some resistance. And people run around going, oh, there's no me, there's no me. Well, that's kind of silly, isn't it? Unless all of that Bill Blah mask that we develop to protect this thing we think is our individual self, if we actually see through it and realize the folly of it and the suffering it causes. You know, all those reactions that arise, we could call them emotional reactions. I'm good with that. They're not fresh, are they? Do you have one where you could probably all think of one where a certain action causes, boom, a certain reaction? We could say things like, well, somebody putting their fingernails down a blackboard, that definitely causes a reaction in most of us. In truth, it's just a sound, but it just drives us nuts. It's like, ah! So maybe a physical reaction, sensation reaction. We don't have to name all of this stuff. Just notice again and again how little of our choices are actually free. Certain, my favorite story, and then we'll just jump into Chenrezig. But I just find this so important. We can learn about this so well. We can have philosophy about it. What starts it? What builds it up? This self-protectiveness. Oh, and what would we be without it? Well, that's a good question. And we can understand, okay, well, it took at least a sperm and an egg for me to be here. And that sperm and egg came from two beings who also needed a sperm and an egg, who also needed it all the way back to wherever your original ancestor began. And I guess you can see that as a bit of stardust if you like the Big Bang Theory, when that explosion happened. Nobody has actually figured out why or how life, that spark, happened. Not that I know of, anyway. Everybody's always trying to figure it out. And now we're working really hard on not aging so we won't die. Immortality. Can you imagine what a mess the world would be if nobody died? Or the politics of who should die and who shouldn't? I mean, it's a nightmare to even start to look at. And yet, we're very busy working on it. But I don't want to die. Well, the good news is you don't. Well, your form does. No way around that. Where is that life energy that your body, that was in your body, that your body supported until you die? Where does it go? Even science says, if I'm correct in how I phrase this, energy cannot be destroyed. It just changes form or changes its. Anyway, I won't go into, because I'm not that good at saying it out loud. And eventually we'll track whatever leaves the body when the form dies and blah, 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 blah. Then we'll try to fix that. It's very human. It's said that human form is the only form that can recognize. Let's throw enlightened mind away. Can recognize real, can wake up. Let's do it that way. Well, if you were in a God realm, which is so very, very wonderfully happy and connected and joyous, and why on earth would you worry about that kind of stuff? It has to be a certain degree of suffering and a certain degree of happiness and a certain ability to think about those things or wonder or a certain amount of curiosity. How's that? We could sit here all this session and talk about intellectually about what doesn't die, what does die, how we have no individual existence, independent existence. I think human babies are one of the most dependent species. Can't survive. Utterly dependent. Some species, the babies can't seem to get, the newborns can seem to survive. Not human. For a long time. Some of us never learned to be independent from our family of origin. And we're certainly never independent from the effects of that family of origin and how we tried to survive. That's the problem. So it isn't intellectually understanding, although that can help. And it's not maybe running around. Someday I'll meet somebody that has run around going, there's no me, there's no me, there's no me. And they woke up from it. I have not met that being yet, but there are a lot of beings in the world. Because obviously, well, there's many ways to shake that up. If you want to, take a look at what you think this week. The random blah, blah, blah that's always going on in our minds. Well, first you can try to relax and see where that's going on. Where does it come from? And in those moments of silence or distraction, where does it go? And the one thing that you may notice, and I'm sorry to say it out loud, It's much better experientially. I'll ask the question. What is the you that thinks it's thinking those? Not the thoughts like, well, yeah, you can take it all the way down. I was going to say the thought like, I'm hungry, I'm going to go get something to eat. That, who knows what's creating that thought? Is it your growly stomach? Is it a physical sensation? Is it an emotional sensation? If we really just rest, not trying to do anything with them, not trying to get rid of thought, not trying to do anything at all, just with some open curiosity. Am I thinking this? Where are these coming from? It's pretty eye-opening. I will say, if you're fully convinced that every thought that arises in your mind, you are intentionally thinking. If you believe that strongly, then just stop doing that when they bother you. You should be able to intentionally not think them, shouldn't you? If you're intentionally thinking them, you should be able to intentionally not think them. Anybody able to do that when you get one in one of those loops? Or all the time that we're not even paying attention, but it's still going blah, 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 blah. Pretty interesting. So that curiosity thing, pretty important. So how does this fit with Chenrezig? Let's jump into Chenrezig, see how it comes up today. Oh, maybe we could do it in a lifetime. Our form. Everybody in here has a form. Obviously, I can see you, you can see me. Never as solid as we think it is. But something has come together that kind of holds our form, yes. I don't see you all weaving in and out of, but maybe I just hold your form because that's how I learned it. I don't know. We don't have to figure that out today. But I recognize each of your forms. Maybe you recognize my form. And yet, if you were to take out a picture of yourself as a baby, is that the same form? Can you say it's the same form? Can you actually say it's a different form? So there you go. Not this or that. Not me or not me. An illusion of independent existence. Okay, so let's try something new. Every one of us is in form. Every one of us was created not by our own intention to be created in form. Well, I don't know. I'm never going to say never, never. But something had to happen that involved other forms for us to become a form. Maybe there's intention to get my, okay, this is funny. My grandson has all kinds of ideas. He's 5 about how he was born, and they're just fascinating things. Never would have thought of them myself. I was saying to him, he has a wonderful older sister who's 8. They have an extremely loving relationship, which in my experience depends a whole lot on the older sibling. And I said to him, you really have an amazing older sister. How did you do that? Did you figure out where you wanted to be? So he said, well, you get, when you're in your mom's belly, you get one chance, 10 seconds is all it lasts. And in that 10 seconds, you can switch into another belly. You only get one time, but you can. And he said, and I saw that 10 seconds and I got in mom's belly. I'm like, okay, that just makes as much sense as anything else. I don't know if the baby that was in the, never mind, we won't try to understand that. But isn't that remarkable? Do we all think like that? Do we all actually experience things like that? Well, we don't once we figure out that if you say things like that, adults get really worried about you. And no, 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 that's not how it works. Do we know? What a wonderful idea. If you happen to catch that 10 seconds, you get to pick the belly. You can move. Cool. Anyway, and here we come into however we got there and however we're coming out. We start utterly dependent on our being in our mom's belly. We'll use Logan's words. With arguably no verbal language, no describer, because there isn't the construct of language in words. You may have sensations. I'm not one of those people that remembers. Some people seem to remember all that stuff. I don't. But that doesn't mean it doesn't affect us. And then as we look at this, maybe we can allow a sort of open-heartedness to arise. Every single human form, we're human today, so began as a dependent parasite, if you will, inside our mother's belly. We carried material, if you want to go genetics, from every ancestor we've ever had. And if you want to rest with that a minute, that goes all the way back to wherever life started. Now I'm using a linear time because if I start messing around with no time, it gets even more confusing. So let's just go with linear time for a minute, if you're all right. There is the possibility that every time is occurring in this moment. I'm not saying that that's not true or isn't possible. However, for the sake of this, every single human form has been dependent in its mother's belly. It has taken on qualities of every ancestor that's ever been. We don't really know which qualities will manifest more than other qualities. Very hard to find a beginning of where you started. Now, we've gotten a little better at it. When I was born, it was with the bright lights and the noise and all that stuff. And then we developed water births and all kinds of things to make birth a little more easy. But let's face it, it's probably not an easy transition. Imagine it for a moment. Even if your in-womb experience was not wonderful, if there was shouting and difficulties and drugs being thrown in there, I don't know that you'd have a judgment of any kind because, again, no describer. Just an experience, but it was warm for the most part. And you were absolutely connected to another being, for better or for worse. Just for a minute, rest with that, and that every human form that survived birth came from a place of warmth, utter dependency, and boom, got spit out. Again, Logan says that is really not very fun because when you're in the womb, you're able to communicate with all babies everywhere of any time. And it's really a nice place to be. So, okay. Is that true? I have no idea. It's true for Logan. It's really hard to come out because it's just hard to come out. There you are out. Most babies cry when they come out. Some babies don't. My granddaughter came out, no crying, with her eyes open, which is not that usual. I don't know. Haven't been around all babies being born. Almost with a look of curiosity. One never knows how you're going to come out. But when we start really imagining, not imagining because it's actually what happened in our stories, every single human form having been tied directly with another being, then coming out, the cord is cut. And that visceral, physical sensation of connection is not the same. That isn't described, but something happened. Is that when the survival instinct kicks in? When the feeling of separation, the sensation, not in words, something changed. Uh-oh. Every human form. It might cause our hearts to open just a little bit to the experience of every human form being. And the need to start to cry when we're hungry. Didn't have to do that in the womb. Well, I don't want to say all experiences because I don't know them. Cry when we're cold or poopy or uncomfortable in some way. Every form, every human was a baby. How many times do we all just forget that and treat people as though they're whatever age they look? Even though most of us still act like a baby sometimes, don't we? Listen to some of the words. That's not fair. Okay, maybe that's not a baby, but it's pretty young. Who said anything was fair? But there's that sense. Well, he shouldn't have done it. It wasn't right. That's not a very mature voice. Who here doesn't have that voice? We all act like children sometimes. There's not a thing the matter with it, as long as we might notice it. Every human tries to find some pattern to hold on to survive. If we walked around looking at everyone like a baby, that basically they're still functioning in many ways as a dependent child, you'll notice how many people try to kill that child, get rid of it, not acknowledge it in themselves. Our Donald Trump is a great example of an absolute child run rampant. I'm sure you have people in your life, in your country, in your circumstances that act like that. So many simple things. I always ask, if every child, every baby felt loved, had enough to eat, and had shelter, what would this world be like? Right there. And then you can watch the personalities start to go however they do. What, do you think you couldn't be Donald Trump? Of course you could. You think you couldn't be your worst enemy? Yep, I'm sorry, you could. Those weren't the, like a pearl growing in an oyster. Doesn't it take sand? It's a terrible analogy. But it's an interesting one to try to experience for a moment. An enclosure with enough irritation to cause something to grow in a certain way. Bigger picture, not, I don't like that person. Maybe what makes me think I couldn't be that person if I'd had those conditions? What do you hold about yourself to be independently true that would keep you from being any other individual than yourself? Oh, I would never be a killer. Really? Do you believe that? Oh, not with your mask, not with the Bill blah that has become your personality. You may be way too moral to think about killing anything. You think there was something independently about you that created that belief system, that way of being, that personality? Probably not. My greatest teacher of compassion was my father, who was unbelievably mean to other people. Very, very bright man and could just destroy people with his words. And I was young enough to watch that. You think that didn't have an effect on this personality? It could have been a mimicking, depending on what was going on around. We could be anyone. We can actually open to that feeling. There might be a shift in our heart. Not that we love murderers, not that we love cruel people, but we can experience them in a different way. Not that we say, oh, I get that. That's okay. They can act that way. I understand why they're that way. No, no, that's not the point. The point is, we could be that person. How could we possibly actually in some natural way help to change that pattern? If we're so busy accepting every kind of pattern, well, it's an interesting thing to come out of my mouth, and making excuses for any behaviors because we understand them, I think we've missed the point. Worked with abused women in my life. Uh, Very brave, very exceptional women that I was lucky enough to work with. But there it was. Well, I understand. He's having a hard time at work and he just doesn't know what to do with his feelings. So sometimes he gets so mad he can't help but hit me. I understand. What does love actually mean? Or what actually is love? Guess I'm storytelling today, guys. It's just how it's going. One of Chagdud Rinpoche's, if you've heard of him, he's passed now. Lamas worked with battered women, first with tremendous anger at the abuser, then with tremendous anger at law enforcement, and finally tremendous anger with the women themselves who kept going back. No matter how many times this person who later became a lama tried to help them when they were angry enough to leave. And she talked to Chagdud Rinpoche about this, and she said, I don't like this feeling, but why can't they see? Why can't they leave? He just was quiet for a minute and said, anger can't sustain itself. When the anger dissolves, all of that other talk of, oh, I understand, and blah, 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 comes back in. The only thing that will change is if we can see, if a battered woman can see that she's also contributing to the pain for and suffering of her husband. Not blame, by the way. And see that by allowing somebody to batter me. The Tibetan way of thinking, you're you're helping to support circumstances which will cause great suffering in future lives. Bad karma, so to speak. And here we are interacting with each other in all these different ways. Yes, a lot of our patterns get made when we're very young. That's why when we look at them, sometimes we go, that doesn't make any sense. No, it doesn't make any sense. When you're 5 years old, you're not a very logically put together being, most of us, right? So logically, a lot of our patterns make no sense. Logically, we know that because we had somebody that had a mustache and wore a cap that hurt us. Logically, we know all people that have a mustache and a cap are not going to hurt us. That's great to know logically. Does it help you when you come face to face with somebody with a mustache and a cap? Doesn't help at all. There's a pattern in there. Run, get out of here, or be really, 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 really quiet, and maybe they won't see you. Or be really loud and angry and try to scare them. Patterns. And you start to feel how every human form's patterns are made in reaction to what we perceived was happening at that moment, and how to protect ourselves. If you grew up in a certain kind of family where anger and emotion and everything, the stereotypical Italian family, and there was anger, and there was loving, and there was laughter, and there was joy, and go watch Zorba Greek. It takes my stereotype away. Maybe when there's anger, it almost feels good. It's like, oh, that's just part of all those emotions in my family. Can you imagine? It wasn't mean. It wasn't because I did anything wrong. That's just how our family was. Not in a description, but that's how the family felt. Full of life, anger, and joy, and whoo. Or if you had one family member who, when they got angry, you got hurt, you are really not going to like anger. Can you feel it? What makes you you? If we can really rest into that, it's the start of our Chenrezig. Feel every little being trying to figure out something to be safe and to be loved, dependent, utterly dependent. Not in those words, not logically, not in ways we would understand now. That's why the intellect is kind of useless to touch many experiences. The intellect is pretty useless as it's a tool to at least open to the idea that maybe the I that we so hold dearly or we abuse with our thoughts. Are you one of the people that if somebody talked to you the way you talk to yourself, you would be outraged? And yet you let yourself talk to yourself like that. What a loser. Why did you do that? How could you be so stupid? Don't you know better than that? Are you one of those people? At least sometimes. What do you think that voice is trying to do? Don't let the outside experiences that you have, to the best of your ability, become your inner voice. That is what happens. Now, many of you think it's your fault that something happened to you when you were young. If you'd been better, oh, your intellect will say, oh, no, that's silly. It wasn't my fault. Remember when you're 4 or 5 years old, everything's your fault. You're the center of your own universe and you're trying to survive. Maybe if I'm just better, maybe if I do something different. And there's where we go so very wrong. Nothing bad that happened to you when you were 5 years old was your fault. My sister's entire life has been warped by, she was 5, I was 2. I was being a very loud 2-year-old. She thought she should quiet me. She couldn't. So our father took us both out to the beach. When we came back, the house was on fire and my mother died in that fire. My sister, who's now almost 80 years old, still thinks it's her fault, which she told me, which I'm like, well, that's a horrible thing to carry. Her fault that she couldn't keep me quiet, so we would have been 80 years. Her fault. How do you let go of that? Can you all see how silly that is? And feel, that's a horrible thing to carry for 80 years, but it's certainly not true or real. Shaped her whole life. What do you have like that? Tons of stuff, promise. We're never going to find every one of those things. But we can start to notice. And we can start to extend that generosity of heart to other beings. Everyone started as a baby. Everyone wants to feel safe and loved, regardless of what they appear to be doing. Or they've given up, which is even harder sometimes. Can you open your heart to them? We do better with not great, but we're a little better generally with feeling great open-heartedness for children that don't have enough food, don't have a roof over their head. But we can only see them when they're children. All those children grow into some kind of adult? Can you open your heart? Not say, oh, I'm opening my heart, walk all over me. No. Realize their personalities, their actions were formed by their experiences and the best story they could tell themselves. How many of us still chase love from the outside? How many of us chase something to love us? I recommend now just get a dog. Solves all of that. You are loved. That love is present all the time if you have any luck with the dog. Or if you have a dog that can't show love, that can open your heart too. That dog's been abused. Their nature is loving. That dog's had something to shift that nature. What do you suppose that it might be true of human form also? That we are open-hearted, open-minded, and something, experiences happen which form this mask, bilbah, structure of how we relate with the world, starting with me and everything out there. Just for now, why don't we invite everything out there as not being separate from us? And notice what happens. Did your heart just go, not doing that? Not ever going to say, hi, puppy. Nice to have you here. Oh, that is one. Wow. Sorry. I digress. They just hang it out there all the time. You know that trick of you hear about for actors or singers or somebody performing on a stage where you see everybody as naked in the audience, or you see them as little children if you're really scared and nervous about performing. And you just visualize that kind of thing. What if we actually let our hearts feel everyone as a little child? Not that we're approving of every method they chose in their structure. Well, we don't really choose those, do we? They just happen. Check that out for yourself too. Try to get rid of one of those patterns and see what happens. Have you ever tried to, have you seen a pattern and gone, oh, I'm not doing that anymore? Those patterns are holding on for dear life. They get tighter. Oh, heaven is having your neck stroked. Uh, they really hold on tight. Why do those patterns hold on so tight? They're your survival tool, and they're causing all your suffering. Damn it. Only way to gently allow the survival instinct to relax. Several methods. What do you think all the methods of Tibetan Buddhism are? They're trying to come around from this angle and that angle and this angle. And try this way. So we might notice we don't even survive the same personality from one moment to the next. How do you feel right this minute in this one? What's your personality right now? Is it open? Is it a little bit afraid? Is it feeling love for the world? Is it, well, don't worry, whatever its individual reaction is having, it won't be the same once you leave here, or even for the whole time we're together. Nothing in form is static. Well, then what the hell do you hold on to? Because that's survival instinct to say, give me something, anything. I don't care. Just give me one thing to hold on to. That quote from Payment Children, which is hard to find. Lions roar, 6 kinds of loneliness. It's not in the book. When you fully realize there is no reference point, in other words, no thing to hold on to, when you fully realize that, it is the loneliest experience a being can have. It's also enlightened mind. Well, how the fuck could that be true? Pardon my language. How could that possibly be true? If you are able to, however you manage it, no, you don't manage it. If you hit that point, and we've all come close to it, if you're in here, of realization, it is an extremely uncomfortable experience. I don't want to label it with terrifying, feels like you're going to die. I don't want to do anything like that. The description of the loneliest experience imaginable can be it. But if you don't hit that and not figure out, allow enough space for that door to open, it's a doorway, until you fully realize that whole seeking for something outside of us is an illusion. Thus, when we hold on to I, it is the loneliest or the most frightening or the most terrifying experience you can have. If we are lucky enough to fall through that into the embrace, Lama Lena talks about falling off a cliff. I don't believe that's the experience. It might be for her. Just like expanding into the entire universe as the entire universe with no possibility of isolation or loneliness or protectiveness, because there is no separation of an individual existence. It's a stupid thing. It doesn't arise. Nice words. How do you get there? Maybe we could start by actually a practice of noticing with every being that we feel sudden anger with, or notice those reactions are usually way over the circumstances. We might start to feel rage when somebody stepped on our toe accidentally. Well, in our whole Bill Blah of stuff, that was intentional, and now I want to kill them. I mean, come on, they stepped on your toe. We can see a lot of these reactions are way overboard for what actually, if we can notice what's actually has occurred. Go, wow, that might be a little overboard for what actually happened here. And we can start to notice we're all beings doing that, just bouncing off of the Bill Blahs of other beings with this reactivity. So maybe we could cut everybody some slack by seeing them as they are. Whether you start by seeing them as a buildup of crap based on their experiences. And again, I'm going to say it doesn't mean forgiving or accepting behavior that is harmful to you, because if it's harmful to you, it's harmful to them to a certain extent. Let's not make that a rule either. Harmfulness is in the eye of the beholder too. So yeah, it's an interaction. How do we respond spontaneously to what is actually occurring in this moment? Practice. So Chenrezig, if anything I've said causes a little loosening of that I and everything out there, we start to realize all of us in human form. We won't even go into all the other forms today, are probably doing the best we have, well, best we can with what we have. Again, it doesn't mean accepting the husband who comes home after drinking and beats the shit out of you. Not helpful. Not helpful. Doesn't excuse who we are. It opens our heart to respond to what is actually happening. And that happened a little bit today. Sorry. Oh, sorry. Hang on. 2 seconds. Because it isn't something that we do looking forward or looking backward. It's something we allow in this moment to occur with every interaction with every being. Instead of what we normally do, ignore, don't care about that being, don't like them, like them. Feel the separateness in that? What if all these words are really true? And how do we realize them, not just intellectually? What if we really are not only all in this together, we are all this together? There's nothing to get into. Wow. So we can take little bitty steps as they open. If we try to force that with intellectual understanding, just watch those patterns. Man, they are going to come up and roar and scream, and the logic will come in. Well, now that doesn't make any sense. Blah, 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 blah. Yeah, but what about going to do if we have no reference point? How are we going to know how to be? How are we going to act? How are we going to support ourselves? How are we? I don't know. To let go and see what happens. If we do have a taste of that open-heartedness, it does not mean that we're more vulnerable. That I can tell you. Vulnerability, as we use it in our cultures, don't know all cultures, is usually about self-protectiveness. Is it not? Oh, I trusted them and they cheated on me. I shouldn't have been so open. I should have known better. You didn't cheat. And for all we know, for them, it wasn't cheating. Maybe they have an idea of an open relationship where everybody just sleeps with whoever they want to sleep with. I don't know. It's our mass of what things should be, and they didn't do it. Isn't it? Check that out for yourself. I didn't say you wouldn't be angry. I didn't say don't feel what you're feeling. Everybody's got their own Bill Blah. Everybody's acting from it, reacting from it, making stories from it, or following stories. Wow. If that opens for just a moment, the word that's used over and over again is love. But how many of us actually don't even have the right word? We've all had moments of it, that waft of open-heartedness. If your awareness, open awareness in that moment notices, you are Sambhogakaya aspect of heart mind. There is no, we attach it so fast, but try. When you have that warm, that's best I can describe it. It's sort of a warm, there's no describer when it's happening is the problem. So it's very hard to describe. All we can do is describe after we've done something with it. That utter open, I don't even want to use the word openness. There is no word because there is no I that experiences it when it freshly arises. Within 2 seconds, we describe it, we attach it. Say we see a newborn kitten, and there's so, or a little kitten that's playing, or a little baby, or whatever it is for you that you hear a symphony that just blows your heart open, or I don't care what it is. We all have different, but that's the stimulus. But we attach the experience of that thing I'm trying to point at, it's not a thing, to the stimulus. And then all hell breaks loose because the stimulus is just a stimulus. It's a come and go. It's going to do things that we don't like. The kitten's going to pee all over your new bed. It was just the momentary stimulus for what's pointed at beyond an I love, blah, blah, blah. If we cultivate the awareness of that as it arises, there is no I or you. There is no describer trying to tell you what it is. There's an absolute timeless quality to it, which you don't notice until you've attached or done something to separate from it. Now, can you see how we're our own worst enemy in a way? Oh, I like that feeling. I want it. It's Jim. I'm going to marry Jim. Well, if Jim's just the stimulus, we've just made a deal that he's supposed to be our begin all and end all. And it's not going to go very well, usually. Sambhogakaya is only, in my humble, very limited experience, awareness of that thing I'm trying to point at that's not a thing that gets called love, but or light or whatever. Can't put a name on it. It's always present. It is no reference point. When the eye of our eye stops panicking, always there. Oh, well, I can't walk around like that. I'd just get massacred. People would steal things. I would, oh, it'd be awful. No, it wouldn't. That's our fear. Trying to think of an example. Ooh, is this true? Try this one for a minute. Pretty much nothing anybody else does has anything to do with you. How does that feel? They're just doing their own world, their own Bill Blah. Surely you've had the experience of a friend and maybe a third person, and you really like the third person. They're a good friend to you. You just think they're awesome. And your friend thinks they're crazy and doesn't want to have anything to do with them. Who is the person? Well, we'll say, well, no, I'm the one that's right. My other friend that can't see this person the way they really are, they're wrong. Well, I don't know. I think I'd rather be the one that was a little more open. But what if the person really is kind of out of their mind and of harm to others? Who the heck knows what's going on? Does it have anything to do with you? Probably not. Ah, can you start to feel how lonely that can, the experience can be if we start to really recognize that? It could be lonely, or it could completely open our hearts, or both, or neither, I guess. Sambhogakaya, the light of a live, interconnected. I guess that's why we use light in Chenrezig. There really aren't any words. And I guess today, whatever's arising is that we can fall into that, what we call light, as that light, because it is always there. It's not an it. See how difficult words can become? And therefore, the tantric symbols. And next week, I really kind of hope today that we just go back to the simple Chenrezig practice, but not as anything that's not experiential in this moment, in every moment, with every being. If it's only present, and we have to start somewhere, when we're in an utterly safe environment and we have a visualization that helps us to open, and we feel that openness and warmth, or whatever you want to call it, love for everything and everybody, then that's a come and go. What if it's always present? What if it's who you are underneath all that Bill Blah? What if it's who every single being in the universe is underneath whatever Bill Blahs and conditions they have? Not just human form, but let's just stay with human form today, maybe. Or you can let it just, some of us, it's much easier to feel open in outdoors, where the beings, other beings outnumber the humans. We humans have a pretty big mask, pretty big Bill Blah. It is the child that wants to be protected, that wants to be safe. The world is not safe. You may have noticed as it presents itself. You are love. It's your nature. It's every being's nature. Pardon the word, I don't have a better word. Go with light if love tweaks you. And there's that irony. Okay, well, I get that in this moment. But if I take it out there, I'm going to get hurt. Darn it. Guess what? Our favorite old friend, self-protectiveness, survival. How can you be hurt unless we perceive ourselves as an individual in need of not being hurt? Whoa, that might have been the coolest sentence that ever came out of my mouth. I'm not sure I even understand it, but it sounded really good. Huh. My two favorite questions are, but they get deeper and they're more depth all the time. What am I protecting? If what I've just sort of pointed at is who we are. Yeah, I probably better step out of here pretty quick too, Molly. So if you have 3 more minutes, I think we can do it. But if you have to run, dedicate away. Wow, what am I protecting? If we all are what I've pointed at, we get a glimpse of it. What do you need to protect? You are vibrant, alive, aware, true bodhisattva. What am I afraid of? Getting hurt, usually. And I better throw in, for the sake of traditional Buddhism, all of this dance, bilblah, the whole smear arises and dissolves in every moment, has no thingness to its thing. Lacks any even moment of permanence. Utterly impermanent. Whatever arises other than what we're pointing at today. The vast ocean of Dharmakaya aspect of heart mind, where anything and everything can arise in an instant and dissolve in an instant. And here we are, like little waves in the ocean, trying to hold our individual waveness as though there were such a thing. Wouldn't we laugh if somehow we figured out that waves are trying to hold themselves individually, independently from the ocean? As Thich Nhat Hanh says, enlightenment for a wave is realizing it is the ocean. We can open our hearts to how hard almost all form tries to protect its individual waveness. which has never been individual for a second or independent. Ouch. You can notice something about your form. If you walk away today, if you want to stay right where you are, that's fine. I'll do a quick dedication. Watch yourself. Do you try to intellectually grab on to what happened today? I don't know what happened for you today. I know what potential was there. You try to figure it out intellectually. Well, didn't she say? Do you tend to fall into well, what's the point anyway? Some sort of an emotional sensation. That's a pattern. It doesn't have anything to do with this moment of today. Do you notice physical discomfort and sensations arising? Only useful to notice because there are patterns coming up. Are you comfortable? Do you feel comfortable with all of this? Confused? Warm? Loving? Everybody will feel a little bit different or perceive things a little bit different. You're in a place where you can just rest with whatever arises. Not trying to hold on to anything, not trying to get rid of anything for a moment. And maybe smiling to yourself when you try to start describing. Please feel free to do that. And I have very much enjoyed being here with you, and thank you. Always grateful for our time. May all beings have moments of connection, openness. I don't have a good word. Maybe just relaxation, where we're not grasping, clinging, trying to figure out, trying to analyze, trying to get rid of, trying to do anything for just a moment. May all of us keep walking or stumbling or falling backwards or doing whatever we're doing on the path in that moment. Not a very straight, clear path for any of us. Not really a path at all. And may we have the courage or exhaustion to keep allowing things to open as they will. Hope that you, if you celebrate the holidays, you have a warm and joyous one. And if we don't, maybe we'll do something different in the coming year. I don't know where that came from. Anyway, I love you all, and I will see you next week.